September the 2013, Wilmington, Delaware. A warm night at the end of summer, the air still holding the heat of the day. A newlywed couple is coming home from a celebration, the wife's birthday. They park their car in their usual spot outside the residential complex, walking along the paved path past neatly trimmed hedges. They're about 30 feet from their condo door. Olga is already putting the key in the lock when more than 20 shots ring out from the darkness. Joseph and Olga Connell die on the doorstep of their own home. Their marriage lasted 128 days. Nothing was stolen. No wallets, no phones, not even a diamond ring that would become part of this story. Police quickly find a suspect with an obvious motive, but the real person behind the hit is much closer than anyone could have imagined. This is a case about trust, money, and a man who turned friendship into a weapon. Joseph Connell grows up in Delaware, on 5 acres of family land in suburban Wilmington. The neighborhood is typical of the East Coast middle class. Single-story homes with wide yards, picket fences, the smell of fresh-cut grass on Saturdays. Joe's childhood is motorcycles, fishing, and endless attempts to take apart and reassemble anything he could get his hands on. He's one of 4 kids, an older brother and 2 sisters, Kelly and Debbie. His mother, Mickey Keller, holds the family together the best she can. Brandywine High School, graduation, and then life doesn't exactly go in a straight line. As a young man, Joe gets 6 years for illegal possession of a firearm. Prison is a long pause, after which he comes out determined to start over. He returns to Wilmington, where he knows every street and every turn. A circle quickly forms around him. Old acquaintances from the neighborhood, buddies from the car scene, a few friends he'd kept in touch with from prison. Among them is Christopher Rivers, and together they open an auto repair shop, C&S Automotive Repair, on Concord Pike in Tallyville. Business picks up. Joe has a trade and a daily routine that makes him feel grounded. Every morning, he rolls up the metal shutters of the shop, fires up the compressor, and gets to work. For a man with his past, it means more than just a paycheck. It's proof that a second chance is possible. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, another story is unfolding. Olga Ryatina from Russia arrives in America in 2006. A new country, a new language, a whole new way of life. Everything from scratch. A first marriage to an American, a move to Delaware, a condo in the Paladin Club complex in North Wilmington. The complex sits in a quiet area. 2-story buildings of light-colored brick, parking lots, well-kept lawns, a playground around the corner, a place where people feel safe. In 2010, Olga's first marriage ends in an amicable divorce. She stays in the same condo. She's used to the neighborhood, the neighbors, the route to the nearest supermarket. That October, she signs up on a dating site. And that's where Joe appears. Before their first date, he calls her and honestly tells her about his prison time. Olga doesn't hang up. They meet, and a closeness quickly develops between them. One that both of them, friends would later say, had been waiting for. People who knew them recalled that Joe changed around Olga. He became softer, calmer, started making plans not just for the week, but for years ahead. On June 7, 2013, Joe and Olga get married on the Virgin Islands in a small ceremony overlooking the ocean. He's 39, she's 39. But even before the wedding, a conflict has been smoldering in the Connell family, one that will soon become a key detail in the investigation. Joe's mother, Mickey Keller, after her own divorce, had given her former engagement ring to her daughter Kelly, a ring with real diamonds, estimated at around $20,000. The stones were large, classic cut, and Kelly wore it every day. For her, it wasn't just a piece of jewelry, but a symbol of family connection. When Joe decides to propose to Olga, his mother wants the stones back. But instead of talking to her daughter directly, Mickey resorts to a trick. She invents a reason for Kelly to temporarily hand over the ring, supposedly to have it cleaned or the settings checked. Joe takes the diamonds, has them set into an engagement ring for Olga at a local jeweler, and replaces the stones in the mother's ring with cubic zirconia, an artificial stone that at first glance is indistinguishable from the real thing. The fake is returned to Kelly. She doesn't notice the switch right away. Several weeks pass before the light hits the stone at just the right angle, and Kelly realizes something is off. The sparkle is different, the refraction is wrong, the weight of the ring has changed. When she figures out the stones in her ring are fake, a fight erupts between her and her brother. Not a minor grudge, a real family rupture. Kelly feels doubly betrayed by her mother, who lured the ring away under false pretenses, and by her brother, who took what belonged to her without her knowledge. Joe argues that the stones belonged to their mother, and since it was originally her ring, she had every right to do what she wanted with them. The family splits into sides. Some back Kelly, others back Joe and Mickey. Phone calls stop, family dinners are canceled, holidays are spent apart. Olga gets dragged into the conflict. The diamonds the in-laws are fighting over are now on her finger. She didn't ask for this, but in Kelly's eyes, Olga is the one who ended up with what was hers. This conflict doesn't fade. If anything, it intensifies. And by the time Joe and Olga get married, the relationship between brother and sister is completely severed. They don't speak, don't see each other, don't even pass messages through relatives. A few weeks before Joe and Olga's wedding, someone breaks into their condo at Paladin Club. A forced door, overturned belongings, drawers pulled open. It all looks like an ordinary burglary. Neighbors would later say they didn't hear a thing. The complex has thick walls and good soundproofing. Olga immediately sends a message accusing Kelly. The ring conflict is still fresh. The resentment hasn't cooled, and to Olga the connection is obvious. A fight. And then someone breaks into their home. The police are called, a report is filed, but the investigation hits a dead end. No fingerprints, no witnesses, no camera footage. The break-in remains unsolved. At the time, it seems like an unpleasant but isolated incident. Its true meaning will only become clear much later. On the evening of September 21st, 2013, nothing hints at tragedy. Saturday, a warm evening. Joe and Olga are heading to the Wilmington waterfront. It's Olga's birthday. The Riverwalk this time of year is especially beautiful. Lights, music spilling from bars, couples on the promenade. They go to a restaurant with a big group of friends. Dinner, laughter, congratulations, toast to the newlyweds. Olga receives flowers and gifts. The couple, married just over 3 months, look happy. Friends would later remember exactly that. How they sat close together, how Joe had his arm around his wife's shoulder, how they both laughed. All evening, Joe is texting back and forth with his business partner, Christopher Rivers. Ordinary friendly messages, where they are, how the evening went, when they plan to head home. The night stretches on, and they don't get back until the early hours. The streets of Wilmington are empty, streetlights flickering on and off. At 1:28 in the morning on September 22nd, residents of the Paladin Club complex are jolted awake by sounds you don't expect in a quiet suburban condo. First, commotion, then gunshots. A lot of them. The sound echoes across the parking lot. 2 different types of weapons are fired, which immediately tells investigators there were at least 2 shooters. Joseph Connell dies at the entrance to the building. Olga, right at their door. Joe is killed on the spot. Paramedics rush Olga to Wilmington Hospital, but the doctors can't save her. She dies that same night. They were married for 128 days, and they didn't make it to their own front door by just a few steps. New Castle County police and paramedics arrive at the Paladin Club complex within minutes. Patrol car lights paint the building facades in red and blue. Neighbors step onto balconies, some come downstairs. Before the officers lie 2 people, dead at the entrance to a residential building. A man and a woman, multiple gunshot wounds. But what they see next doesn't fit any typical pattern. Joe is still gripping his cell phone. Olga's keys are sticking out of the front door lock. She almost managed to open it. On Olga's hand is the diamond engagement ring, the very one that had torn the family apart. Nothing has been touched. Crime scene techs cordon off the area with yellow tape and place markers by every shell casing. There are dozens, scattered across the asphalt and the grass. This is no robbery. Dozens of casings, 2 types of weapons, and not a single attempt to take anything from the victims. Someone was waiting for Joe and Olga outside their home. Someone knew they would return right here, on this very night. It was an ambush, planned and carried out with cold precision. Detective Jamie Leonard of the New Castle County Police takes the case and starts with the key question. Who needed both of them dead? Not one of them. Both. Robbery is ruled out. A random attack with that many shots and 2 shooters. Impossible. That leaves only one logic. Someone deliberately ordered a hit on this couple. Leonard begins combing through the victim's circle. Friends, colleagues, relatives, acquaintances, neighbors, everyone who had contact with Joe and Olga in the preceding months. And the first thing he hits is the family feud over the engagement ring. The ring story looks like a ready-made motive. The mother gave the ring to Kelly, then tricked her into giving it back. The diamonds were swapped for fakes. Kelly discovered the switch, and a rupture followed. On top of that, there's the break-in. Shortly before Joe and Olga were killed, someone broke into their condo, and Olga had directly accused Kelly in a message. For the investigation, the picture comes together fast. A woman deceived by her own family, nursing a grudge, accused of a burglary she may not have committed. Motive, backstory, emotional charge, it's all there. Leonard and his colleagues spend the first days of the investigation focused on this theory. Kelly Connell becomes the prime suspect. She's called in for questioning at Newcastle County Police Headquarters. She comes in voluntarily, without a lawyer. She confirms that her relationship with her brother had indeed been severed. They hadn't spoken in months. But she insists she had nothing to do with either the break-in or the shooting. Her voice trembles, but she's consistent on every detail. Their mother, Mickey Keller, says the same thing. Kelly isn't capable of something like this. Nobody in their family is. But a mother's word isn't evidence. What becomes evidence is something else entirely. Kelly has an alibi that is impossible to refute. On the day of the shooting, she was undergoing treatment for breast cancer. Medical records, doctor's testimony, hospital registration data. The investigation checks everything, and everything checks out. Kelly physically could not have been at the crime scene and could not have organized it. She was fighting for her own life. The sister theory, which had seemed so logical, collapses after a single verification. And Leonard asks himself a question that shifts the entire direction of the investigation. If the ring conflict wasn't the motive, then why did it look so convenient? Why did every detail, the feud, the accusations, the break-in, come together into such a tidy picture? What if this isn't a coincidence, but a construction? For several weeks, the investigation stalls. The only solid lead has fallen apart, and there's no new one. Detectives interview dozens of people from Joe's world. Friends, shop customers, neighborhood acquaintances, former cellmates, colleagues from auto shops on Concord Pike, people from the area. Everyone's alibi, connections, and finances are checked. Nothing. Not a single lead, not a single motive that holds up under scrutiny. Pressure is mounting. The Connell family demands answers, local media covers the unsolved case, supervisors remind them about deadlines. Leonard goes back to basics, to what always tells the truth, even when people stay silent. He requests phone records, not just the victims, but everyone connected to them. Joe's phone, Olga's phone, the phones of friends, colleagues, acquaintances, hundreds of numbers, thousands of connections, months of data. Police analysts load the massive data sets and start searching for patterns. Who called whom, when, how often, how long the calls lasted. And buried in that mountain of data, a pattern emerges that cannot be explained by coincidence. On the night of the shooting, Joe is texting with Christopher Rivers, his business partner. The messages are ordinary, friendly, where they are, how the evening went, when they'll be home. But after every single one of Joe's messages, Rivers immediately calls another number. That number belongs to a man named Joshua Bay. Bay, in turn, calls a third person, Dominique Benson. Benson contacts a fourth, Aaron Thompson. 4 links in a single chain, each one activated within minutes. Information flows from the top down. The address, the time of return, the route. Someone was coordinating the ambush in real time, and the source of the information was the victim's own phone. Leonard uncovers another detail. Several calls and messages from Rivers' phone, made right around the time of the shooting, had been deleted. Not all of them. Only those tied to the critical window, roughly from midnight to 2 in the morning. Someone tried to clean up the trail but didn't account for the fact that the carrier stores connection records on its own servers, regardless of what happens on the subscriber's phone. Cell tower analysis adds the final piece. Aaron Thompson's phone, at the time of the shooting, pings off a tower near the Paladin Club complex. His phone was within a few hundred yards of the crime scene at the exact moment the shots were fired. Christopher Rivers, business partner, friend, the man Joe trusted enough to text from a restaurant on the last night of his life, becomes the prime suspect. And only now, with Rivers' name at the center of the web, does the investigation start digging into his real life. and they find what Joe either didn't see or didn't want to see. Beneath the surface of their business partnership lies a severe opioid addiction, one that consumes more money and more sanity with every passing month. Rivers buys cocaine, Percocet, and oxycodone from that very same Joshua Bay. Bay isn't just a street dealer. He's a former FBI informant, a man with experience, connections, and an understanding of how both criminals and law enforcement operate. The doses keep climbing, the intervals between purchases keep shrinking. Rivers funds his habit from the business, at first in small amounts, then more and more brazenly. A partnership that started as an equal alliance between two mechanics had long ago turned into a situation where one works and the other spends. But the key finding is in the financial documents. In October 2012, the partners take out a mortgage through Susquehanna Bank for just under $1 million. The bank sets a standard condition, cross-life insurance. Each partner is insured for $977,500, and if one dies, the other becomes the beneficiary. For the bank, it's a standard guarantee on the loan. For Rivers, it became something else entirely. The business was sinking. Money was draining into drugs faster than the shop could earn it. Debts were piling up. Parts suppliers were starting to demand prepayment. And at some point, Rivers realized, if Joe dies, nearly $1 million goes to him. The insurance policy wasn't just a piece of paper, it was a way out of the financial pit. The motive the investigation had been searching for since day one turned out not to be the family feud over a ring, but the business partnership. Now, the entire picture reassembles, and every fragment falls into place. According to the prosecution's theory, the condo break-in that had looked like an ordinary burglary was staged. It was arranged by Bay on Rivers' orders, not for the loot, but for the narrative. The calculation was precise. When the real crime happened and police started looking for a motive, the first thing they'd find would be the family conflict. Kelly, who had fought with her brother over diamonds. Kelly, who had been accused of the break-in. Kelly, who, by investigative logic, had both the motive and the backstory. It was a false trail, planted in advance like a time-delayed mine. And it worked. The investigation spent the first, most critical days chasing a lead that had been a dead end from the start. Through Bay, Rivers found the triggerman. Bay recruited Dominique Benson and Aaron Thompson, two shooters, the mastermind, the middleman, two triggermen, 4 people bound by money and phone calls, each one knowing only their own link in the chain. Rivers promised Bay $60,000 for organizing the job. Before giving the order to execute, he paid in advance, $5,000 in cash. After the shooting, he passed another $5,000 through Bay to Thompson. Benson received $4,000 in 2 installments, $2,500 and $1,500. In total, $14,000 out of the promised $60,000. The triggermen risked life sentences for money that barely covers a month's rent in Wilmington. The remaining $46,000 Rivers never paid. He simply didn't have it, and never did. Olga didn't die because someone wanted her dead. She died because she was there. Rivers, according to the prosecution, couldn't afford to leave a witness. 2 instead of 1. On September 3rd, 2014, nearly a year after Joe and Olga were killed, Christopher Rivers is arrested. They pick him up early in the morning, at home, without resistance. The indictment is prepared by the prosecutor's office with the participation of the Delaware Attorney General's office. The case is classified as a contract killing, 2 counts of first-degree murder, possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony, conspiracy, and criminal solicitation. The prosecution's key witness is Joshua Bay. The former FBI informant and drug dealer strikes a deal with investigators. He pleads guilty to conspiracy and agrees to testify against the other participants in exchange for a significant reduction in his own sentence. In April 2016, the case goes before a jury in New Castle County Court. The courtroom is packed. The Connell family, friends of Joe and Olga, reporters from local outlets, Wilmington residents who had followed the case for nearly 3 years. Rivers' defense tries to challenge the credibility of Bay's testimony. He's a drug dealer, an informant, a man with his own agenda, a man who participated in the conspiracy himself and is now saving his own skin. But it's not just Bay's word working against Rivers. Phone records, cell tower analysis, deleted messages, a chain of money transfers. All of it paints a picture the jury finds convincing. After several days of hearings and deliberation, the verdict comes. Guilty on all counts. Judge Charles Butler hands down 2 life sentences plus 50 years. Rivers listens to the sentence in silence. Mickey Keller, Joe's mother, weeps in the front row. Bay receives 5 years for conspiracy. The price of his cooperation with the investigation. Aaron Thompson, one of the shooters, is sentenced in October 2017 to 2 life terms plus 45 years. Dominique Benson is convicted of first-degree conspiracy, but the jury couldn't reach a unanimous verdict on the charge of direct participation in the crime. A retrial is ordered. The outcome of the retrial is not documented in public records. In 2018, the Delaware Supreme Court hears Rivers' appeal. His attorneys cite procedural violations and unreliable witness testimony, and rejects it. The sentence stands. Every participant in the chain received their time. Rivers never got what he set the whole thing in motion for. The insurance payout was frozen after his arrest. The money that 2 people died for was never paid out to anyone. The auto repair shop on Concord Pike was left without both owners. One in the ground, the other in prison. The entire time Joe sat in that restaurant, he was texting with a man he believed was his friend. Every message he sent became a coordinate for the shooters. 128 days of marriage, 30 feet from the door.